people could use some hope. And I would want our listeners to hear that too. It's like, you feel like you're right in the middle of this dark night of the soul. Understand that if you've gotten there, at least in part by listening to us or being in therapy or going to meetings and things like that, that's not a message that says you're on the wrong path. That's a message that says you're on the right path.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety, the podcast. I'm Tom Rutledge, and with me is Dr. Alan Berger and our wonderful producer, Patrick Newman. How are you doing, Patrick?
Doing well. We lost a family pet a couple days ago to cancer, and I was pretty shocked at how emotionally affected I've been by that. It's one of two little dogs, my mom's dogs, and the thing is that we would always walk them together. We would take them on trips together. We had one of those leashes that's kind of like a Y, so it splits off into two. And so I think just every time, even now, I think of one of those leashes never being filled. It's very existential kind of. So I know you guys can relate to that.
Oh, they leave blank spots. I mean, it's like everywhere you look, you see them, and you see all these little things that just, I mean, you forget, you don't even know how many places they are in your life physically until they're gone, and you don't. Yeah, and that's a beautiful image, though. That, I mean, in a sad way, but that little leash that just basically is just got the one solo doggy on it now. So I'm so sorry. And it does. Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Well, thank you. And so pour some iced tea out on the curb for Molly. Molly passed away. Yeah. Okay.
Alan knows this stuff too.
How's Rocky?
Rocky's much better, thankfully. But it is, we have these emotional attachments to family members, and Molly was a family member for you, Patrick.
When I was doing a lot of group therapy back in the day, it's like there was, I don't do group therapy a lot these days because, of course, there's television to watch and I have to get home. But and there's probably some other reasons. But there was one subject in which guaranteed everyone would shed a tear in a group, and that was when somebody lost a pet. And it's nothing against losing people, and everybody wouldn't necessarily cry or whatever. Like I just want people to know, because sometimes people will feel embarrassed by that. It's like, it's just different. And and we all have our different angle on it. My simple way of thinking about it is these guys are our experience, or really our experience with true unconditional love. It's like, and as human beings, we have some pretty broad conditions we put on people that we have these places where we're very unconditional in lots and lots of ways, but humans aren't capable of absolute unconditional love. It's like these guys do this, they everything they do, they let go. Everything that happens, we let go, and I mean, I can celebrate that in the morning when I give my cat Marcus his pill that he hates, and then immediately afterwards I console him because that bad man just came in and gave him a pill, and he accepts my consolation, he accepts my love, and it's so beautiful. So I think it's a deep hurt. And this was your mom. This was your mom's dog.
It was, I think my mom's the one who got them, because our first family dog passed when I was, when I was just going into college, so a while back. And then she got the two little dogs as like, the successor to the old hound dog. So, but it's a reminder of my own mortality as well. I mean, I definitely found myself looking in the mirror and being like, wow, the batteries are going to run out on me eventually. And that is a very scary thought.
Yep. Yep. And hopefully what we do with that is we turn it into a very motivating thought. That's
the idea.
Yeah. I always say I want my fear of death to be the fear of interruption. That don't bother me now. I'm busy. It's like I'm really having a nice time here, or I'm accomplishing something I want to accomplish, that kind of stuff. And instead of just what I have spent lots of time doing, just sitting around being afraid in general. I want to use my time wisely. So, yeah.
I want at least one brilliant manuscript to be like on a hard drive somewhere when they find my body. The next Confederacy dunces, just right there.
What a book. And what a sad story. We'll talk about that some other time, but it's like, yeah.
You're talking about fear, Tom, and your book was all about that, embracing the fear. And
yeah,
look, I understand you got some feedback recently on it.
Oh yeah, if you don't mind, before we get started with your book, I'd love to share this. As a matter of fact, there's just a short note. It's so cool. This is one, and Alan, tell me if you don't identify with this. It's so cool. Just you go to your check messages and stuff like that, and just every now and then, you get this nice message about somebody who's found one of your books. And it's not, it's like we kind of get used to the people that we see on a regular basis, and they know our material and that kind of stuff. But just out of the blue, somebody else has found that, and it's like I always just think that's so cool that the books are out there doing the work. And carrying the message. And I'd love to read this. It's just real brief. It's from a young woman. It says, I just read a copy of Embracing Fear from my local library, which I appreciate the library having it. It resonated with me so much that I bought a copy so I could reread and highlight parts of it. It really made me aware of my relationship with fear and how I've spent, and this goes to the time thing. I've spent my energy avoiding it instead of using the energy to do things that I want to do with my life. Thanks. My cat's in my face. Excuse me. Thanks for waking me up, which I love that line. I look forward to reading more of your work. So I immediately responded back to her, of course, and told her about, in case she didn't know about our Thursday night group and our podcast, and hope she will join us. But if you are listening to our podcast today, thank you very much for that wonderful feedback. And don't think we ever take any of that for granted. We don't.
Right on.
It means a lot. It really does.
It's in one way it reflects that the word we're getting out there and the things we're sharing are making a difference for people, and that's really why we're doing this. Is that we get to share some of what's been shared with us, and hopefully it's going to help somebody figure something out in a better way in their life.
Right. Well, in the simplest form, I always just say writers need readers.
Yeah.
There is no purpose for us unless there's readers on the other side. So I appreciate it. So, but speaking of that, let's get back to your book.
Well, that's what we're doing. We've been walking through, and it's funny she talked about waking up, because we've just finished talking.
Wake up,
waking up and living consciously, and those were the first two insights, insight 1 and 2. And, I put insight number 3 in this, discerning our emotional dependency, because as we start to wake up and start to bring a more full awareness and consciousness to our life, I think what we start to see is that we've been living a life based on contingencies. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for me, it means it's back to this idea that I'm okay if. See, that's the contingency. And look, I'm not trying to say that that's a terrible thing. Thank God for parents that were willing to take care of us. I'm okay if needs, right? I mean,
right.
Okay, if mom fed me, I needed her to feed me. So I'm okay if she changes my diaper. Thank God she did it. I'm okay if she picked me up and sung me to sleep or something like that. We need that connection, that responsiveness, that attunement in our life in order to grow and develop. but the arc of development is moving us towards self-support, towards differentiation is another way to say it. And so in order for me to get there, I need to become aware. And this is the way I like to say it, Tom, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I need to become aware of who I'm not. Who I'm not is this person that can stand on my own 2 feet. I was at an NA meeting this morning. I was just sharing with you, and we were talking about step 8. And, when I raised my hand to share, and I said, I just love this step. It turns out on Thursday nights, we've been on step 8 now for quite
3 years.
I don't know if we're going to ever get out of step 8.
That's right. We love it there, though. I'm having so much fun in step 8. I've never had fun in step 8. I can honestly say that, but I am having a good time in step 8.
Step 8. I mean, come to the fun house in step 8, the step 8 fun house. I mean, that's what we're doing now. And part of the fun is, and see, people don't get this stuff. It's like what I'll never forget what you said, that you got this client sitting there and they're in pain and they're struggling and stuff, and you can't help but to start to get a smile.
Yeah.
Smile is not
not sadistic. It's not sadistic.
No, it's a smile knowing I know where this journey is going to go, or the potential. We don't know. Go. We know what the potential is. We know that pain that somebody's feeling right now can be opening doors to their life that they could never imagine.
Right. If they stick with it, and I like the fact that you put the humility factor in there too, because we don't know what their story is going to be, but what we do know, because we've experienced it ourselves and we've witnessed each other and so many other people before us, and since we've been there, is if you stay on this path, yes, it's going to be better. Your life is going to be better. You're going to be better. There is a moment of joy when you realize that there, and and we find ways to share that. I'm sure you do too. I'll tell them, I know this hurts for you really badly right now, but and there's a and I think there's a place sometimes where I know that I can be hurting bad enough to where I don't give a damn whether you have a positive frame on this or not. Do not tell me that, and hopefully we become sensitive to that. And I try to do that, but there's also a place there where people could use some hope. And I would want our listeners to hear that too. It's like, you feel like you're right in the middle of this dark night of the soul. Understand that if you've gotten there, at least in part by listening to us or being in therapy or going to meetings and things like that, that's not a message that says you're on the wrong path. That's a message that says you're on the right path.
That's right.
You stay the course. Even if you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it doesn't mean it's not there.
That's right. And look at this. This is a part of a process. It's a step in that direction. And as I become aware of these things, then I've got the opportunity to experiment with other ways, right? New possibilities.
New possibilities. I love that. That's one of my favorite Alanisms is new possibilities.
New possibilities. Yes. And that's what this is about. That's what everything that we talk about is about, the therapy. But as I was saying, so I'm in this meeting and we're talking about step 8 today. And what I realized is that the way I looked at it this morning, which I'll bring into the meeting on Thursday too, is that another way of thinking about what's happening is that second half of our first step, that our lives had become unmanageable, right? We are powerless over our alcohol. We are powerless over alcohol. If you're in AA, if you're in NA, we are powerless over our addiction, that our lives have become unmanageable. Well, that second half of that first step, that unmanageability, part of it is, yes, when you have an addiction, including alcoholism, your life is going to get more unmanageable. But it was already unmanageable before we picked up and started using, or before the active phase of our addiction started. And I said today, in one way, we can look at what we're doing about making a list on step 8 as now taking a look at the specifics of that unmanageability and what it's done. Is how the course of our life, the trajectory we took, had certain consequences, certain sequences of events that were going to follow as a result of the way that we thought that we that would make life work, right? We always come up with these things. Our intention is good, right? We're trying to
Right.
figure out.
Well, yeah. Well, I love this because this is one more of those places where I keep saying to you on Thursday night that I just love how I am getting to see the steps from very different angles in this, and that going back to that second, one of the things I said in the recovery decision thing that I wrote is that the first part of the first step is not reversible, but by accepting the first part, the second part is reversible. But I never thought of what you just said, which is, how did I get to alcohol in the first place? Because my life was unmanageable. Because I was not doing it. I was not equipped to deal with my life. I was not managing it. And it never occurred to me to think of it in terms of, no, the alcohol and the alcoholism did not cause unmanageability. It was one more of my ways of trying to cope.
Yeah, that's right. And then what I tied into it, and when I was talking today in the meeting, I said, and today I realized that my unmanageability in life was caused by this other validation, this need I had for life to be a certain way. I called it's a mentality of that my life was contingent. My life was contingent on what you did.
Got it.
Contingent about what happened. It's what other people did, how things went for me. And it never was centered in what I did. It was always centered in what was going to happen to me.
So as soon as I get that, I'm thinking about, I'm going through my whole life thinking of the various places. As soon as it's like, wow.
My first, it's so funny that the first thing that keeps coming back, and I've said this a few times, I'm obsessed with Susie Valinsky.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, Jess, doesn't get too upset about this, but I'm obsessed with Susie because in the third grade, I knew Susie Valinsky would have kissed me at recess. My life I would have been in heaven. I was waiting for that kiss from Susie Valinsky. She never kissed me. She married my friend, actually. My God, what a betrayal. How did I
now speaking on behalf of the whole respect of science, though, since we can't time travel, we cannot test that. So it is still, I want you to know, and my apologies to Jeff, but it's still possible that would have been what would have happened. It's like we cannot rule it out.
And I was certain that if Susie kissed me, my life from that point on would have worked. Everything would have been great.
But I could here's what I would say on my own selfish behalf. If Susie had kissed you, if you were correct about that, and I was saying, like, we can't say that it would not have happened. There's no way I would have ever met you. And so I just want to thank Susie for rejecting you.
The kiss
that
I'd like to thank Susie too.
Okay.
See, thanks, Susie, for the look. And in one way, that is the truth about these things. See, at the time, it just reminds me of another thing. I was talking to someone the other day. I am a fan of this woman by the name of Byron Katie, and she has a very, very specific approach to helping people. She calls it the work. All capitals, right? And she goes into the 4 inquiries when you're struggling with something. Is this true? Is it really true? If it was true, what does it mean? What does it mean if it's not true? I mean, it's a great way of challenging your assumptions and expectations and all of this stuff. But one of the things she's also great at, she says, she goes, what is the value? What can you be grateful for that didn't happen? Like, she was working with a woman that was dealing with an incredible loss in her life. And she says, let's just look at a minute from, well, what has that loss brought into your life? And it was amazing because she was doing this in a group, and all these other people said, well, what your loss has done for me is opened me up to the experience I'm having right now with my loss. I mean, and so you start to see these things that you don't think have any value possesses a value that you could have never imagined. But anyway, that's for another show at another time. We're talking about emotional dependency today. And this emotional dependency thing was this life based on a contingency. And that contingency created an I'm okay if mentality. So I really became so reactive and victimized by everything. You know, when you talked about that our victimhood, right, becomes the biggest issue. Well, it's true, because it was so connected to what was underneath that, that my well-being was determined by all the things around me that were happening or not happening to me. And so I didn't have any sense that I was in any way had agency in my life or the determining force in my life. My center of gravity was out there. And and this is the great news about emotional sobriety. It's now helping us grow up, where I'm now, instead of being so dependent on what's happening around me or on the people in my life, I'm starting to experience that my life is determined by what I'm doing, not what they're doing, by the actions I'm taking in my life, by the perspective I bring to my life, by the consciousness that I cultivate in terms of having, by the personal constructs that I challenge and continually try to update to see a better way of being able to connect and deal with what is, by shifting the focus from life should be a certain way to now, how can I be to deal with what's happening?
Well, you're moving to, you're moving from passivity to proactivity.
That's right.
It's like because the one way, it's like it's interesting when you say it that way. I mean, I get that. I'm thinking of examples in therapy this last week. I was working with people about that, but it's still, and this is one of the cool things I like about this work is that the wisdom that is here is every time we discover it, even though it's about the 868th time I've discovered this particular piece of wisdom, if we're really tuned in, it's fascinating, first of all. And the other thing is it really lights up every time. And it's like that idea of being a problem solver who's looking to see, what am I going to do with what life is dealing me, instead of what do I need? What do I think I want to be dealt to me? It's like, it's a totally, I mean, it's talk about simple but not easy. It's a beautiful example of simple, not easy. It's a simple concept, and nobody needs to beat themselves up because it's hard as hell to do, because we are so programmed to do it the other way.
And be victims. It is what I would call part of a spiritual awakening, right? It is now, if you just think of a spiritual awakening as now an illumination, right? Looking at things from a different point of view, right? And this is a spiritual awakening. It's a spiritual experience to shift your consciousness from this perspective, because it opens up so many possibilities. Like you said, now, it's about what action can I take? How can I digest this experience? How can I now meet this experience to grow myself instead of being victimized by it? I am being inspired by it, right?
Well, and let me just toss you there, because while doing it the way you just said, you're also not there. You're not spending the additional time and wasted energy on evaluating this thing that is happening. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Is it, it's like, it's a thing. So you're dealing with it. And a lot of times what we end up doing is just sit there going like, is this good or bad? And it's amazing how much energy we just leak with that kind of thinking. But that's the way our culture teaches us to do it. That's, so it's normal for us to do that. Yeah.
The other thing I see people doing, and I've done, is I just get caught up in my objection. Wow, this is not supposed to be that way. Isn't this terrible? Look at what's going on. And then, if I'm not aware of that, then I try to get Patrick involved. Patrick, look at that terrible thing. And Patrick and I will both sit there and object together. And, that's what a pity party is, right? I invite
and it's so-called negative bonding. And I having grown up in a family where it was the basis, the glue of my relationship with my siblings, was basically, it's really tempting, because it's like finding somebody. I was in a situation recently like that, where it's like finding somebody that basically can share a negative view. It's like there's a bit of a high to that. And if you're a smart ass like me, it's fun. It's you can do stuff. So sometimes recovery is sort of inconvenient, I find, because I realize I'm having a nice time doing this old behavior, but I need to stop it. I need not to do it, or I need to change it. And it's like, and if I'm being really honest, I will at times say, okay, well, I'll do that tomorrow, and I might postpone it because I have not mastered this stuff. But it's like it's not all, it doesn't all feel bad, is what I'm saying. It's like sometimes because we can connect. And we can just look at the polarization of the world and our, and that's all through negative bonding, on any political position. It's like the idea of finding, we're trying to find, as therapists, I think we're trying to help people get to a place where we can focus on communication rather than on right or wrong, good or bad, smart or stupid. And I don't want to get off on that either, but I think just the stuff you're talking about is so important. So I lost my own train of thought.
It just creates, and see, I think that's the other thing that is, I think, important about this work, and that I love about it. It really starts to create an experience of emotional freedom, and that my freedom is dependent on what I do and how I deal with life, not on what is happening to me, but in terms of what I do, how I deal with what is happening to me, right?
Yep. Amen.
To the experience I'm having, not the experience. And see, that's the thing that we don't even realize it. Like one woman in this meeting this morning was talking about, and I could just hear how emotionally dependent she was on her mother and dad. She's an adult. She's in her 40s, but she's still caught in that thing. I want their approval. I want them to behave in a certain way. I mean, that's the other thing I heard her saying all the time. God, I still don't know how to deal with what's going on with my dad. I just hope he could behave differently when I talk to him and stuff. And it's so interesting that we still get locked into this thing, is that we don't expect what we expect to happen. It's the weirdest thing in the world. It's like, you see what's going to go on. We have a sense of it, but somehow, because of our dependency, is we need to be different. So we create these illusions. Well, maybe this
let me just tell you, I was in a group one of my little nutshells says, surprise is denial's last holdout. And it's like when we're the one that's most familiar with the stuff, and we'll say, can you believe? And I was in a group one time, and the woman came in, the group knew each other very well, and she told a story about her husband, who was very insensitive and quite cruel, actually, and some of the things he said. And she punctuated it with, can you believe that? And there was like 7 other people in this group, and I mean, they couldn't have done it if they had rehearsed it better. Everybody said, yes, we believe it. and we started talking about how you're the only person here who doesn't believe it. That's right. And that's what you're talking about is like no, it's like we got to stop being surprised by what is absolutely predictable.
Would you say, Alan, would you say that seeking environmental support rather than self-support, is that seeking of the environmental support, is that like the natural impulse?
It was the first impulse because of our undifferentiation, meaning it wasn't even an impulse. It was the first, it was our experience with reality because of being undifferentiated. We needed the environmental support, right? And when we were in our mother's womb, we were completely dependent on everything she did. She provided us with nourishment. She provided us with oxygen, everything we needed, security, mobility, everything was provided for us, right? When we're born, we take the first step towards supporting ourselves. And isn't it funny? All of these body therapies begin with what? Breath. The first thing when we were born is to what? Breathe.
We got to breathe.
Support ourselves. We were no longer getting oxygen through the umbilical cord. We now had to oxygenate our being. It was our job to inhale and exhale. The umbilical cord wasn't doing it for us anymore. So to me, that's the prototype of self-support. I have to breathe for myself, right? Now, later on in life, I forget this emotionally, because what I want you to do when I'm emotionally dependent on you is please breathe for me. I mean, and you can't do that. I mean, even if you love me to death, you can't breathe for me. I mean, you can give me CPR until I start breathing for myself if I'm in a crisis. But you see what I mean? It's I have to be able to provide that support for my life. Biologically, that is instinctual. Nobody has to.
But Alan, I'm sorry, I just got to say this. It's like I'm listening to in my head to music, you know, all the codependent music of the world that we grew up on, that we love. It's like we say it exactly like that. I cannot live without you. I cannot breathe without you. My heart will stop beating without you. It's like, oh my God. It's like, and I love those songs, but boy, are they codependent.
Are they ever? I mean, one of the things I write about in the book, I don't know if it's in this chapter, but I brought in that John Lennon song is "You Can't Do That."
You can't do that, yeah.
That, right? It's like, you know, it's amazing how emotionally dependent that song is based on. All the lyrics. Right. Song is based on it's that emotional dependency. So the arc, right? The biological arc is always moving us towards wholeness, meaning able to function and support ourselves in our functioning. That is built in, right? That is our being. In fact, on Thursday night, I read that little sentence from Jung's letter to Bill Wilson when he said, he says that Roland Hazard's thirst for alcohol was a low-level spiritual thirst of our being's need for wholeness.
Right.
Right? That's how he said it. That idea of moving towards wholeness is really, we see it all the time. Kurt Goldstein saw it he was a neuropsychologist, a neuropsychiatrist, a neurologist, and he worked with all these brain injured soldiers from World War I. And what he saw is that even with the brain injuries and limitations they had, they tried to optimize their functioning in whatever way they could, given their limitations. So it's not like that process ever stops. And we see that with what we called, you know, used to call them character defects or pathological symptomatology. Today, we just call it adaptations, that we adapted in our families the best way we could with what was available. And we did it around this principle of wholeness. I'm going to adapt to this to ensure my existence, to ensure my wholeness to whatever degree I can. Now, listen, it was compromised because we weren't, you know, all the things we needed to really take care of ourselves weren't available. We did the best we could with what we had.
Now let me go back. I want to go back to what is your name, Patrick? That's it. It's I get you two boys mixed up. It's like just like my dad did with all of our names. It's like but you were talking about environmental support versus self-support. So to me, I mean, and I'm asking you also, Patrick, if this is part of what you were asking, but it's like, because the question sort of implies, and I don't think you meant it that way, but implies that we need to shift from environmental support to self-support, because obviously this is one of those places where we're talking about adding, not switching. It's like, because it's and what we're teaching is about how it's not about environmental support. It's about how you do that. And it's like, it's coming from the inside out rather than I need you to fix me. I need to know, but knowing when to reach out and say, I don't have what I need right now. And so I contact one of you or both of you and say, I could use some help. That's not, I want people who are listening to know that we're not saying that's not part of self-support, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're not saying that we can become, you know, so individualistic that we don't need anybody. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that the relationship we have with people now is based on a different thing. It's not that I need you to make me okay, but can our relationship inspire me to become more whole? Of course it can. I mean, that's the value of therapy. That's the value of sponsorship in a program. That's the value of going to a meeting. I mean, is that we encourage each other to grow along these spiritual lines, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. I want to read a few of these these nutshells that are in the book, right? That I call out in these in the different chapters with these black boxes, right? But there's a couple of them that I want to call out. So the first one is trouble doesn't mean something is wrong. It means that something is missing.
That's one of my. I have my book. I have my book open to that with a paper clip on it. That's one of my very favorites.
Missing. It's just that now I have to discover how best to deal with this, and it just means that I haven't developed that capability yet. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I'm defective. It means I'm evolving.
Read it again. Read it again, so everybody who's listening can get this. This is so important.
Trouble doesn't mean something is wrong. It means that something is missing. Something is missing. So now, instead of it that something's wrong with me, it just means that I'm evolving. Now I've got to see what, as Tom said, how do I solve this challenge that life has given me? What can I do to meet this one? And oftentimes it means developing a part of myself that's undeveloped. And now I have an opportunity. Now, what does that mean? I'm moving towards what? My need for wholeness, right? I'm moving towards becoming whole. There was another line in here that I thought that was really great that I wanted to call out. And it says this, it says, before we gain true independence of spirit, autonomy, authentic self-esteem, and mature love, we have to become aware of how we keep ourselves immature. So if I become aware of how I keep myself stuck, my emotional dependency, right? How my emotional dependency keeps me stuck. Now I become aware of that, and the paradoxical theory of change starts to take place. As soon as I own it, a new possibility exists. I don't know why that works so well as it does, but I do know that seems to be the process. We admit we're powerless, we discover power. We admit we're emotionally dependent, we start to see how we can support ourselves. If I admit I'm a liar, I start to become honest. If I admit I'm ignorant, I start to educate myself. That step of owning what's going on for us is so important. Now, I know for me, one of the things that kept me so stuck, Patrick, was these ideas of who I was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be ignorant. Somehow I was supposed to have all of these knowledge just somehow given to me. I don't know where that illusion came from, but it was ridiculous. It's like I had these ideas that who I was supposed to be was nothing with who I was. So I rejected myself and I tried to be this idealized self, right? And I was such a phony. It was incredible.
Well, you can't get anywhere that way. See, this is Roger such on Thursday night is such an advocate of this, and I've really learned a new way of thinking about acceptance through this. The acceptance is the first step to change at any time. It's like the little bit we do, you practice accepting yourself and you'll never stop changing. And it's like and what I give for that is it's sort of a stupid little analogy, but it's like, if I'm sitting here just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and I want to come see you in Philadelphia now, or near Philadelphia, Alan, then I not only need to know where you are, I need to know where I am. Right. And if I take the directions that Patrick would give me, but his directions are from California, and I try to set out in my little car to go find you with his directions, I am immediately lost because I have not accepted where I am. And that's the simple truth about what you're saying with that is like it's like accept what is really true, and immediately you're unstuck.
Yeah, that's right. Now we start to move that towards becoming what we can be, right? It's a phenomenal process that takes place. And look, I think that in one way that, what happens to people in recovery is a testimony to the power of this paradoxical theory of change. Every 12-step program starts with it. We admitted we were powerless, that our lives have become unmanageable. That owning that, and that's a tough thing to own, right? you know, Bill called it, every natural instinct cries out against admitting our powerlessness. We don't want to do that. We don't want to think of ourselves as that way. We want to think of ourselves as controlling things, right? As being able to handle things and stuff like that. But when we accept that, as Tom is saying, when I own that that's the case, now new possibilities present themselves to us. So
because you can't solve a problem that is not accurately defined. We know that in medicine all the time. If this doctor is treating me and I'm not getting better, let's go back and get a second opinion. It's the fucking wrong diagnosis.
That's right.
That's the problem definition. So if we want to help, but we want somebody to help me because I'm a guy who's, just a little low on power rather than powerless.
Yep.
It's, we most all of us have tried it that way. It's like, that's not going to get anywhere because it's the wrong definition of the problem.
Well said, Tom. Well said.
Yeah.
Where does that paradox come from, by the way?
The paradoxical theory of change?
Yeah.
I think it's been around forever. I mean, many people attributed that idea to Fritz Perls and Gestalt therapy, is that the paradoxical theory of change is what people would do in Gestalt therapy. So if let's say, instead of just trying to will someone to change, right? Well, if you want to do it, just set up your goals, right? That's one source. Like, that would be one thing, is that if people were just rational beings and you said, all right, you want to stop drinking, let's just go ahead and I'll tell you as your therapist, let's work out a plan on you to stop drinking. Well, if it was that simple, we wouldn't need therapists. You put your mind to it and you're going to do it. And there's a whole philosophy around that. And that works to some degree. I'm not throwing that in the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not saying it's not important to set goals in your life, not important to strive for those things, all that. But with these emotional issues, we know that there are other forces involved. There are other forces involved. And it's not just a matter of putting your mind to it, but it's starting to understand yourself in all of the forces that are involved in terms of what's creating your behavior. And many of those things can be outside of our awareness. So see, I think that what I'm so excited about, and I imagine Tom feels this way too, is when I help somebody see something that they're unaware of, they have this aha moment.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Really?
Yeah.
I get it now. I see how that relates to what I'm going through. I see how this experience I had relates to this experience and what I'm doing. And at that moment when they own, wow, I see what I'm doing, now they see a new possibility. It's a phenomenal thing, man. It really is. It's part of what keeps me so excited about the work.
Yeah. That paradoxical thing also happens in relationships. And so one of the things that I'll tell people a lot of times, like you were talking about the woman in the meeting, talking about how she wanted her parents to be different, the truth is it doesn't guarantee that this will happen. There's no formula that says that. But what I'll tell people is you're actually more likely to see change in the person you want change in when you let go and stop trying to change them.
That's right.
Now, the trick is you have to actually let go and stop trying to change it. Because when people get a hold of that concept, they'll do that. They'll go like, okay, but then they realize later, I'm just pretending to stop because I'm waiting, because if I stop acting like I'm changing you, then you're supposed to change. And it's like, that won't, it's amazing how long we'll hold on to that. But it's like when we really let go, and sometimes it comes out as simple as, how many times you get to a thing where somebody's talking about somebody in their family and the invisible policy manual clearly has the rule that says you don't talk about these things directly. And you just simply ask the person, have you ever asked that person to do that differently?
Right.
No. Well, why not? Let's try that, and sometimes that'll work. Sometimes it may not, but it's like, again, new possibilities, things we've not considered before.
That's right. Well, it's great. I love digging into these chapters because it's fun to revisit writing this book. It takes me back to some of those great moments I had with Vince when we were having some of these books and stuff like that.
I just wanted to call out one other great line from the book is expectations are resentments under construction. I like that one.
I love it. Love it.
They sure are. And emotional dependency generates a lot of those. As I said before, that I think the pathway to this whole thing is that our emotional dependency generates these claims and demands on life, that life needs to be this way for me to be okay. Those then consciously become, because we're not going to call them claims and demands. We're all too modest for that. I'm not going to say, I demand that you do. I mean, some people do that.
Right. Yeah. No.
Narcissistic, but most people aren't going to say, I demand, Patrick, that you're perfect. Right. You're not going to say that because you know how absurd that is and how, how outrageous it is. Right. So what it does is that what we do is we now manipulate that and we water it down. And I think it's like we take this thing and we coat it with something that looks more acceptable. So now it becomes an expectation. So if it's an expectation and it becomes then an unenforceable rule and how we should be, it's more acceptable consciously than saying, I demand that you're like this, or I demand that you do everything and you have every thought in your consciousness to take care of my emotional well-being. Well, if I said that to you, you'd say, God, Alan, you're asking a lot from me. And I would have to say, you're right. But that's what this emotional dependency does. And see, that's why we have to make it more consciously acceptable. So we now modify these demands and claims into expectations, unenforceable rules and shoulds. And I love that.
And disappointment. See, that's because this is my jam here. I spent years doing this. It's like I will let Patrick know what my expectations are very clearly, but it's going to be through my disappointment that I may not even be saying to him. He may even ask me, "Are you disappointed?" I go, "No, it's okay. Yeah. It's all right. Don't worry about me."
Subtle, man. See, it's subtly manipulative with this stuff, but it's so important to become aware of this process, because the minute I see that what I'm doing is trying to get you to do what I need to be doing for myself, now all kinds of new possibilities. It goes from blame to empowerment. And that's such an important thing, is instead of me blaming the world and people for what they're not doing to make me feel better, I become empowered to see what I can do to feel better.
That phrase, Alan, blame to empowerment. It's like because when you said that, I love that so much. I thought, okay, what do I love about? Well, I see it as such a huge expanse between those two. But in this case, what you're doing is you're demonstrating how this is actually can be a very organic, natural process with the power of awareness.
Right.
If you can do that, what we do with awareness is we fuck everything up for ourselves. I heard somebody say in AA years ago, we can't stop anybody from drinking, but we can take the fun out of it. Yeah. And it's like, and that's what we do as therapists. We bring people's awareness up. So, and you and I, we all know, the three of us, however crazy, dysfunctional, or asshole like I've ever been, however drunk I've ever been, I still have the capacity to be that, but I can't do it without knowing what I'm doing. And that makes it no fun at all. And it inspires me to basically keep thinking in my recovery, because once we can shine that light on something, and you're saying that insight that people can have, it changes so much.
So let's what I'd like to suggest, gentlemen, if this is okay with you, is next week, let's stay on this chapter, because I just want to explore this concept of emotional center of gravity.
Yes.
I really think it's deserving of a whole show in itself, because it's so powerful, practical, useful in terms of understanding these things. So next week, we'll stay on this chapter, Discerning Our Emotional Dependency, and we'll explore this emotional center of gravity.
See you guys next week.
Tend your life. Tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.